Hi, everybody. Welcome to the StandUp Day Google Hangout. This is being presented by Campus Pride and the StandUp Foundation. My name is Rebby Kern, and I currently work with Campus Pride. I'll be your moderator today, and we have some fabulous panelists who are going to talk with us about being LGBT athletes, participating in the athletic sector, as well as what it means for them to stand up. So we can go ahead and jump right in. I would like to introduce our panelists. I will allow them to introduce themselves and give a brief synopsis of what they do, who they are. Anna, we can go ahead and start with you.
Hey, I'm glad you started with me because I figured out the mute button real quick. Hi, I'm Anna Aagenes, and I'm the Executive Director of Go Athletes, and I'm also a runner, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Thanks, Anna. Chris?
Hey, I'm Chris Mosier. I'm a nationally sponsored triathlete and a coach in New York City. And I'm also the founder of transathlete.com, a resource for folks to find trans-inclusive policies in the sports world at various levels of play, from K through 12, collegiate, recreation, and professional level.
Thanks. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Shaw. I am the head women's basketball coach at University of Laverne. I'm also a faculty member for the NCAA Women's Coaches Academy and also for the Alliance of Women Coaches. And I'm just super happy to be here and can't wait to hear all the questions.
Awesome. We also have Lauren.
Lauren Neidigh and a psych student. I'm just working groups on college campuses to try to build a more inclusive environment in NCAA athletics.
Thank you. And last but not least, Monica.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica Rashan and I am a community organizer and I currently play on the Tampa Bay Inferno tackle football team.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. We're all really excited to have you all on board. So what is StandUp Day and really why are we all here? Every November, StandUp Day is put on and it's in remembrance of how we can stand up against bullying. It's also a time to celebrate real champions like all of us. Ben Cohen is the co-founder and the head of the StandUp Foundation. He's one of the world's best athletes, and November 14th marks the time when Ben's father died as a result of violence. And this violence continues to go on, and StandUp Day is a way for us to recognize that this is still happening and really take a stand, use our voice and our actions to make a change. And so Campus Pride and the StandUp Foundation has collaborated to make this effort known, to build awareness, and to really allow for all of our champions here today to really elaborate on why standing up is important to them and how they stand up every day. If you'd like to participate further in StandUp Day, you can go online right now to campuspride.org. There's a blog where you can download the 2014 StandUp Day Action Kit. These are things that you can do in your community, on campus, and online, and you can even win prizes. There's a prize package of up to $2,500 just for you taking a stand today. If you have any questions today, you can tweet at Campus Pride using the hashtag #StandUpDay. You can also follow all of the folks that are on the panel. Find them on Twitter, find them on Facebook, stalk their lives, and get to know them. So I'd like to go ahead and really jump in here. And with all the things that you've done in your community and as athletes, it would be great if you could each speak to what it means for you personally to stand up. How is it a lifestyle for you? And what have you learned in being able to stand up of what it means most to you? It's kind of open-ended, so go ahead and take a stab at it. We can start with Anna if you like.
Hey, sure. No, thank you so much to Campus Pride and Ben Cohen StandUp Foundation for hosting this. I think that, in recent years, we've really seen a lot of different people standing up. The work that we do with Go Athletes on college campuses, I think before, it was high school and mostly, college athletes taking a stand. But to me, taking a stand is, addressing any sort of anti-LGBT comment when you hear it. It's about being out, and it's about having no tolerance for, the quote small things, an incorrect pronoun of someone who's trans, using the F word, being derogatory towards women. It's all important. So everyone can stand up every day, and that's what I think is so exciting about it.
Great, thank you. Anybody else would like to take a stab at it?
I'll go next. I think just definitely what Anna said, we all do that, I'm sure, in our own ways. The way personally that I stand up is through the different speaking engagements that I do, especially in my field with coaches. So not only do I try to create a great environment for my student athletes, but I think getting the resources needed to the people that are helping these student athletes is important as well. So I'm open with my personal life, and I think a small piece during the coming out process is you, in a way, continually always have to come out when you introduce yourself or when you speak about it. And I think that's another way to stand up. And I think in little ways, I use social media. So whether you can hug things or show your support, I think social media in this day and age is a great way. Whether you're an ally, a part of the LGBT community, that's a small thing, what Anna was talking about, that you can do to just show your support and stand up.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that as well. I really like that you mentioned the social media piece, because I think that that's a big way that folks communicate it now, and so it's a really big way to also stand up. One thing that I really like to do is just to notice things, by posting an article and asking for commentary on it, or calling out things that I think are kind of messed up. If there's a lot of Trans Day of Remembrance is coming up, and there have been an unfortunate number of deaths of trans folks this year at the hands of violence, and in a lot of the reporting that happens in those cases, reporters misuse pronouns or misidentify folks, and so posting articles like that and making folks take notice of appropriate ways to interact with people is something that I like to do through social media, and that's one way that I like to stand up. Another way is just as a trans athlete. So I'm a trans guy, and I use he, him, his, himself pronouns. For me, competing as male, it's really important I identify as a trans athlete and put myself out there, because when I was thinking about transition, I didn't have any trans male athlete role models that I could look to. And so by me being out and being open about my identity and continuing to compete as an athlete is one way that I sort of stand up and let other folks know that that they can compete and that they can participate in sports still if they have a trans identity. So that's something that's really important to me as well.
You've all put out some really great points. Is there anything else that folks would like to add to that?
I think, too, just actively seeking resources, and even personally for myself, being told about Generation Out athletes a year ago, to me, has drastically changed my life and the network of people that I know, that I admire, and that I know I could go to for support. So I think being able to actively seek resources, whether you're out or not, and sometimes even when you're not out, those resources really lay out the foundation for you eventually coming out or feeling comfortable with actually being who you are. And then I guess something else too, just self-reflection and constantly wanting to educate yourself, I think, is a part of how I stand up, being aware of myself and being aware of others, and how our social identities interact with one another, and ultimately resisting is a big part of how I stand up.
Just to go off of what she just said about self-reflection, I think that's really important. Just trying to learn more and put yourself in a position where you're like more readily available to stand up for somebody if they need it. I also think it's important to just be there for people. After I wrote my coming out article, I got 20 or 30 emails from people I had never even met, and it was really nice to be able to talk to them and kind of, help them and let them know it's going to be okay just to be themselves.
Absolutely. Those are all incredible items. And thank you all so much for putting out such profound thoughts already in the beginning. I think we're going to have a really great conversation here today. I myself was a collegiate athlete, and coming through that self-awareness and coming out and being on a religious campus, I really had this the intersectionality of really trying to figure it out. I'm so lucky to be able to work with Campus Pride and continue working with collegiate athletes and folks that are on college campuses who are really pushing and doing that resistance so that we can all have better tomorrows. So another thing that was brought up today was queering media. And it's very clear that people love watching athletics, and we've been able to watch in a new way through social media. In what way have you been able to queer the media in sense through athletics? You can just jump in if you're feeling engaged.
I'll jump in. So I think it's kind of what we touched on earlier, where I think it's kind of a virtual activism, I suppose, to where you're going to retweet things or you're going to post different items, just like Chris was saying. You're going to post things that you're noticing, topics of interest that you want to get people talking about. And that's important because maybe what you're noticing is something else that maybe somebody else noticed, and now this is going to give them a connection and a connector to now start bringing other people together. And we all know the impact of social media. So whether it's a simple picture of maybe a new ad campaign that you've seen that's now highlighting the LGBT community, where in the past you would have never seen that. So I think when you see different organizations opening up their minds to that, then you want to continue sending that out there into the universe, I guess, in a way. But definitely using that and then tagging on with what Monica was saying is looking for those other resources that other people might not know about. So now when you put that out into social media, it's just educating a whole new world of people.
Absolutely. And Monica, you have a really great blog up right now. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about how that sparked and the way that you utilize your blog to queer media?
My blog? Sure. For me, it's just an outlet to get all my thoughts out. I think there's a lot going on in the world right now, and sometimes it can be overbearing. And I think something that Julie talked about with social media, to me, it's been a way to create another community. I find that I can go on Twitter and see, like, wow, this person is tweeting about something that's really important to me, and a hashtag, that could be your education for the day. That's your classroom, this virtual classroom that Julie's talking about. So I guess my blog is the same for me. I notice that when I write on paper, I just will put it off, but if I go to my computer and type it up, I know that I'm going to publish it. I don't care if anyone reads it or not. It's just I got it off of my chest. So it's been a way to kind of just like help me throughout, I guess, my life. It's been a release, I guess. And I will write about anything that's important to me or something that I saw on social media that I might have not agreed with, but I'm still grappling with what I believe. And I think for me, when it comes to social media, it's been a way where I can tell people what I believe. I'm not necessarily trying to change their beliefs, but just sharing, these are my beliefs, and hopefully it gives someone perspective.
Well, I'll say I love your blog, and I love the intersections of identity that you discuss in your blog, and I think that those are the really important articles and conversations that we sometimes fail to have, and so I appreciate you for that. One thing, yeah. one thing back to what Julie was saying is, about like the media campaigns, or if you see a company that's using LGBT folks in their advertising and putting that out there, letting more people see that. I also think that that's a great way we sort of vote with our dollars, so, that's a great way to support other companies who are pushing LGBT rights forward. So sharing that in social media, and then also I like to support those companies in real life as well. I think social media has been, and querying the media, I mostly do it through social media. I don't think anybody reads my blog. It's mostly about running, so it's not very exciting. But I think every time that we have a story out that has our personal narrative, and every time that we open ourselves up and share that, whatever the outlet is, I think that that's querying the media. And the more folks see our stories and read our stories, hear our stories, and see our successes as athletes and as coaches, the better off we are. So, I don't know, that's one of the missions of Go Athletes, is to provide a network and to share these stories that young athletes have. I've been so fortunate to work with Anna and the other folks with Go Athletes. I'm the director of strategic initiatives, there we go, and strategically initiating folks to share their stories, which is awesome. And I think that's one of the best parts about the sports movement right now, is just that all of these stories are coming out, and like Lauren said when she shared her story, how many folks that touched. And when we queer the media in that way, folks are more impacted by hearing a personal narrative and a personal story than by hearing statistics and executive reports that come out. So I think the power of personal narrative and of storytelling is the way that I think that we as a group are queering the media the most right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You've all brought up some really great things here. This brings me to wonder, in what way are we keeping accountability? So whether that's through media, whether that's sharing campaigns, and even really saying this is what's really happening in our locker rooms. And so when we look at bullying and the ways that you each are interacting with your networks, as we talked about earlier, in what ways are you holding people accountable, whether it's to bullying specifically, or whether it's to when we're looking at gender identity and sexual orientation, and that inclusivity?
Well, I find myself bringing it up as a topic of conversation a lot, which I think is one way of intervening, is calling people out if they don't have policies that are inclusive. And that's sort of the reason behind transathlete.com was that on the whole, in terms of gender identity and sports, we know that sports are very gendered spaces, and that for folks who identify as trans, from middle school and high school level all the way up through collegiate and after college recreational organizations, have a very difficult time participating in sports. And statistically, a lot of trans folks choose not to compete in sports after they decide to transition, or if they identify as gender nonconforming, because the spaces really don't allow for them to participate in a way that's safe and comfortable. So, and I think that that's a form of bullying against gender nonconforming and trans people, that not providing them the same opportunity for sports, which I think is a major character building part of a life experience, is something that we need to fight against. So I like to do outreach to organizations if I know that they have a policy that's not inclusive. And I also question a lot of organizations, just sort of randomly. If I have a friend who's playing in a league, I'll ask, hey, what's your trans inclusion policy? How would you place a trans person? Do you have any trans people in your league? And try to work with them to make sure that their policies are at a place where everyone can safely and comfortably compete. And I think that we need to have those conversations in order to move the sort of trans sports movement forward.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah. it's just really important to like be yourself. And I knew when I came out that I was going to be in a locker room full of girls every day. That was going to be pretty hard, but I also knew that all of those girls loved me as their friend and as a person. And I think that when somebody really loves you, and even if they have an opinion against being gay or like necessarily don't agree with it, they know that they can't really openly express that, and still have you in their lives if it makes you uncomfortable. And I think that just being out and being yourself kind of in a way forces people to become better versions of themselves.
And Julie, looked like you were adding something there in the beginning.
I think just with the language, just from the coaching perspective, I think I'm very aware of the language that I use, and I'm very aware of the language that my players use. And if there is any language that is used that is unacceptable, then it's quickly called out and then educated. And I think that's the important part, is the education part. And then also in speaking with coaches, to also find out, I think that's a super important question that we're asking all of administration in athletic departments, is what are the policies that we have? And that's stuff that I do here at Laverne, to where we need to get our policies together. So we're working on that. But the thing is, this campus, which I love, is super open and they're welcoming, and they want to have these policies created. And I know that could be difficult. And when we're talking about stand-up day, I think other athletic departments in particular, but college campuses all around, people need to start asking those questions. And that's a way that you can stand up. What are those policies? And then now how can we educate people on them and get them put in? But definitely language is a huge thing where you want to try to address automatically.
Absolutely. Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that was a great point, Julie, and talking about how inclusive and open your campus is. And I was wondering, Rebby, if this is a good time to maybe, if you could mention the sports index, because I think that that's something that would be really important for folks to take away, that they can do this. Do you want to speak to that?
Absolutely. That was just coming up. I was like, can I plug or not? So we're going to shamelessly plug. And the Campus Pride Index is a really great self-assessment tool. When we talk about resources and we talk about that accountability and the institutional commitment that schools are making, a lot of us have been engaged with college athletics one way or another. And the index looks at programs, policies, and practices specifically within collegiate intramurals, collegiate athletics, and how the institution is making that change and taking a look, as Julie said, of what are our policies and what can we add to make our locker room safer, to hold coaches and athletes more accountable to each other. And even, are our teams a safe place for people to come out? And so this tool essentially rates the campus based on their answers to these questions on a 1 to 5 star scale. With the Campus Pride Index, which was separate from sports, we had a lot of schools come back with improved scores. And that's the goal. The goal is for these schools to benchmark themselves and really use it as an internal tool of, this is our starting point and here's exactly what we can do to make it better. Thank you very much, Chris, for allowing that to be part of the conversation. And so around accountability and policies, this might be a good time to look at our challenges. In what way have you faced a major challenge in athletics? Whether you speak to the trans experience or coming out on a team experience, or even as a coach or as a community member. Would anybody speak to maybe a specific challenge that they found a way to overcome and really institutionalize a change and stand up?
Rebby, I could speak to that.
I can talk a little bit. Previously, I worked at UMass Amherst in a residence director role, so I worked in the housing department, and I volunteered in athletic department. So I think giving your time is a way to stand up too, right? I know I want to work with athletes, so volunteering in athletics. And the most important piece of this all, I think, is creating space. So I know that there were student athletes who identified as LGBTQ, but I didn't know who they were. So I just made a flyer and said, hey, meet in this meeting room on this time, and then it became a weekly thing, and reaching out to the Stonewall Center there to see if we can partner to make this institutional thing. And I'm no longer there, but the organization is now Go Athletes chapter at UMass, and they have the logo on all of their flyers and whatnot. In the group there, I'm still in touch with them. They're really focused on activism and education. So I think that's so important for the students to create space and help them feel empowered so that they are really the driving forces of what the group is focusing on. And I think as far as accountability for the athletic department, for the Stonewall Center, for the entire campus, like, you know, these students are there, these student athletes are there, and their experiences matter on campus. So I think it takes time, though. I mean, building authentic relationships with people takes time, but I hope it's worth it in the end.
Authentic relationships. Anna, it looks like you were jumping in there, but you may have been muted. Would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Thanks, everyone, for the nods. So personally, one of the biggest challenges that I've had in the sports community, just LGBT activism in general, is bringing up the conversation of bisexuality within the LGBT community. The B of LGBT is, you know, the largest portion of that. You know, more people identify as bi than maybe lesbian, gay, or, you know, for their gender identity, identify as trans. Yet we're, you know, not that visible compared to those who identify as lesbian or gay. So personally, I think, one, just validating that it's not, that it is an identity, and then making sure, you know, just like I'm doing now, is bringing it into conversation, even if it might not seem like it flows as well in the discussion. But I think overall, as a community, I think one of the most difficult things, as some folks have touched on, is pivoting the mainstream conversation, right? So we get, you know, when Jason Collins comes out or Michael Sam comes out, we get a huge amount of media attention, you know, just because of how huge the male, you know, cisgender male sports market is. And I think our role as activists is to help pivot that conversation. So when, you know, Jason Collins comes out, can we talk about Brittany Griner? If we're talking about sexual orientation, how can we make sure that we talk about issues for transgender athletes? So I think taking, you know, the mainstream discussion and making sure that we're all included is a charge for us as activists, and also for schools. You know, just because you say, oh, we had a gay athlete come in and talk to everyone, our issue is solved. We need to explain that it's much more layered than that, and that there's many types of identities, which can seem overwhelming to people, but I think we as activists have to figure out how to send this to people in a way that's not going to make them defensive, but make them want to, you know, seek out change.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very, very much for that. Anybody else have anything to add on?
I can add on one more thing too. Anna just gave me this idea. I mean, just thinking about the intersections all around of all of our identities, of all of our friends' identities within the LGBT community, and how like a Jason Collins can come out or a Derek Gordon can come out, and then are we talking about sexism in sport too? You know, how are we highlighting all of these things that many of the athletes that we know, maybe even ourselves, have experienced in sport?
Absolutely. And when we look at the panel here today, we have one male on the panel. And so maybe sexism is a good time, you know, maybe this is a good topic for us to jump into. In what ways have you faced, you know, the gender inequities in sports? You know, would you like to speak to the trans experience? Would anybody like to expand on their experience on sexism or the perception of sexism in the media around sports?
Well, let me just say I'm pretty pumped to be on this panel because it is we get a power crew, so I'm excited. But you know, I think for me, my experience has been really interesting to go from an identity of queer female, and I didn't really identify as a woman. So my I didn't have a strong attachment to that, but I was competing in all sports. And to shift my identity to now being perceived as a straight white male, I sort of was just handed like the triple-decker layer of privilege all in one shot, right? So it's been a really interesting, not only my transition, but my social transition, which no one ever talks about. I was totally not prepared for, what that would be like, to experience firsthand, like the privileges that I'm granted because of sexism and because of racism and because of classism and things like that. So I think it's really important in my identity as a trans guy to always bring up sexism in the conversation and make sure that we always have female-identified voices on panels like this, because we can't have those conversations about standing up in sports without those voices present. And male-identified athletes or trans-identified athletes can't always speak to that experience. And so I think it's crucial that we talking about it, but that we have all the voices in the room to have those conversations. So I'm definitely interested to hear what other panelists have to say about that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Anybody else like to add in?
The only thing that jumps into my mind is just in the coaching field, and we talk about it a lot in women's sports, where there's this decline of women coaches, and so that's our big topic. To where is it a networking thing, or is it perceived where you talk about women who might not be willing to move for certain jobs, where men probably feel like they are able to just up and move, and then family, work-life balance, all those different things start coming into play. But yeah, we've definitely seen a decline in the representation of women coaches in general. So that's one of the topics that just popped into my head on that issue.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else for that?
Yeah, Rebby, I think that there's a conception, and Julie brought up a great point of less female coaches in general. I mean, that's a problem for a coach. I've never been a coach, but from what I've heard, I mean, the stakes are a lot higher for women, so if there's less women coaches, you're probably less likely to come out, because why would you want to do anything that would jeopardize your job? So, but as an athlete, I think I've seen on, my campus and other campuses that the stereotype of female athletes as lesbian is detrimental to, women's athletic culture. There's a policing that goes on, and I also think that this hurts women who identify as heterosexual or, don't identify as queer or genderqueer, because they're policing themselves, They use the word dyke when they talk about opponents. They're afraid of being perceived as a lesbian if they get a short haircut. It's very, it's not the type of homophobia, just to talk about homophobia and not the other forms of anti-LGBT bias, but for homophobia, it's assumed that, oh, women's sports, it's fine. They've been, good for decades, but it's not, because there's still a lot of policing that's going on. I think the stereotype sometimes prevents really good athletes from continuing with their sport, just because of how they might be perceived by others.
I want to jump in on that one again, because that's a super great point that Anna brought up too, because I think, speaking personally, when we talk about in Division I women's basketball, there's only one head women's basketball coach. And I was just talking to a reporter the other day about, and that in itself, I think, highlights that there's something going on. And then I also think, personally, is when that's in the back of my head of when I am going on interviews, will this be something that is brought up, or will this be an issue? Those are just thoughts that might come into play, and I think that's what Anna was also talking about from the student-athlete perspective as well. What are these thoughts that are going through student-athletes' heads? Because some of these athletes are prominent figures on their campus. So now what happens if they do come out? And but I do think for me that's the way that I've learned to stand up as well, since we're going with that theme, is to be honest and to be true with it. If I am asked about it, then I'm going to be open about it. So I think that's a great point that you brought up.
Any responses? I think it's Monica?
Yeah, I guess for me, both Julie's and Anna's comments made me think, because I present as masculine, so my experience was different, even playing on a softball team. So thinking just about masculinity in general in women's sports, and assumptions that are made, stereotypes that are correct or not, just how detrimental that they can be and are being to women's sports.
Absolutely. And this, you know, we had brought up Michael Sam, and we brought up coming out, we brought up how, in a way, that we're leading the way, right? And I think that for some LGBT athletes, both in college, in the community, and in professional sports, leading the way comes with a pretty heavy weight, right? When you are the only open NCAA Division I trans athlete, when you are the only out gay NFL football player. So in what way are we taking care of these athletes, right? And in what ways would you give suggestions to folks to have that self-awareness and to also empower them to continue standing up? Would anybody like to speak to what leading the way is, what it looks like, and how we can continue supporting it?
I think leading the way is just being you. Is to keep it simple. Just be you, and don't try to be anything else, and don't try to be, you know, because I think once is your authentic self, then that's going to come across more relatable. It's going to come across better, more approachable, so that you can help. And then I also think kind of maybe what Lauren said is when she told her story and she got a lot of letters, I think also maybe sending encouragement to people. That's a small act that can go a long way.
Absolutely. Any other responses? No, and even thinking about what it looks like when all of these feats have been accomplished. What does your world of athletics look like once we're fully included, when inclusion has happened? What does that look like?
I think it's kind of just bringing people together. I know after I came out, a lot of my straight friends, you know, kind of wanted to get involved because I was doing all these things like going to the sports summit, and I did a couple of projects with Swimming World and Swim Swam over the summer where I did no hate photos for visibility and inclusion. And we had this workshop last week with Wade Davis on campus for diversity and inclusion. I think that was big too. But I really think that you know, educating our straight friends, you know, bringing them in helps kind of to like build that big picture where everyone's kind of accepted.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think being out and open and authentic about our own identities is the best way to do this. And also, I totally agree with the notes of encouragement. You know, I didn't feel like I had anybody before I came out that I could talk to as a mentor or as a role model. And there were other trans athletes out there, but it was before sort of national trans athletes hit the media, I guess. So I remember, I think I was out for maybe 1 year before Kai Allums came out at George Washington, sorry. Sorry, Kai. And I remember when he came out, and I like sending him a Facebook message and being like, I don't think he's going to answer me, but I just wanted to say, like, I know this is really hard, and, you know, you're not the only one. And now we're great friends, and, you know, I love Kai, and he's done so much to help push the trans athlete movement forward as well. So so appreciative for those friendships and connections that we can make because of our stories. So I always encourage folks to, when they're comfortable, share their stories and reach out to other folks who have shared theirs. And I think that's also why having a network of athletes who have experienced this is a great thing, because we can talk to one another and really rely on one another and stand up for each other if something happens in the media or in real life. That we can advocate for one another. I know for me, it sometimes is easier for me to cope with harassment or discrimination if one of my friends stands up for me. And so, I would stand up for anybody if I saw something going on, but sometimes when it was personal in the early sort of part of my transition, that say someone misgendered me and used the wrong pronouns, I felt really ashamed and embarrassed by that. And if it was on a team and I didn't want to correct one of my teammates because I was embarrassed and didn't want to call out and make a bigger scene, to have one of my teammates there for me to step in and intervene and say something was just so huge for me. And that's what teammates do. That's what teammates are there for. So the teammates that, when they hear an anti-gay comment or someone use a slur and step in and say something about it, as an ally or as another part of the community, I think that's huge to do that and stand up. So that's just wanted to add that in. Thank you to the allies and my friends for all their help along the way.
That's very cool. Absolutely. I definitely agree with all of that. Does anybody have any responses to that or anything to add on? I'd like to remind our viewers that if you are online right now and tweeting, feel free to ask us questions at StandUp Day or at Campus Pride, but use the hashtag StandUp Day, and we will go ahead and get to those questions as they come in. We can go ahead and continue the conversation here. Looks like we do have one question come in. Being at an HBCU, how can you help get the athletes here to embrace the community and avoid discrimination and the gay stigma? And this is coming from James Blackburn at NC A&T. Does anybody have any response to that?
That's a great question, and something that I often think of when I think of the intersections of my identity, and for me, race being most salient. So I think that you have to have conversations about intersectionality, and I'm not, particularly familiar with the climate on your campus, and I would love to continue the conversation even outside of this Google chat. But bringing people together around intersectionality, and I know you said you're at a HBCU, so I think race might be a good place to start in talking about racial identity, and then stretching it out to the intersections of identity, whether and bringing in the LGBT conversation, because I think it's really important. It's necessary. It's extremely necessary.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I'll add that I think what even Monica touched on earlier, how she started her group with putting up a flyer and started organizing that way. I think that could be a small step that can be done. But then I also think linking up with other groups on campus. So also what Monica was saying with the intersection happening, also not familiar with your campus, whether you want to identify certain organizational groups that fall into those intersections and try to talk to those people to see if you can now get them started on the conversation, or because they might have that same interest, but they didn't know how to bring it together. So I think it would be up to you to be that catalyst to try to start that conversation to happen. But look at the resources, because on campuses, the resources are there. I think it's always a matter of us going out and finding them. So whether it's so I would think on my campus, my first inclination would go to our multicultural club on campus, and then maybe also linking up with our LGBT center too. So then it's connecting those two to host something to start that conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Those points are really great, especially on a college campus. The more power you can get between more groups of, partnerships, that's going to help each group really run more smoothly. We have another question here as well. This question is from Joshua Thorne. I'm a high school senior out of the closet, recently committed to run track and cross country in college next year. Congratulations, first and foremost. They'll be running at a small school in a rural area. What advice do you have for incoming freshmen who want to come out to teammates but don't know how? That's a really good question, Joshua. Anybody want to add into that?
I'll do it. So Joshua, this is kind of what we do with Go Athletes, not to plug me and Chris right here, but kind of, so I mean, each experience is different, and so when people write to us, often what we'll try and do, I mean, we provide confidential support, so anything that you talk to us about is confidential, but each coming out process is different, and your team culture, as we brought up before, in the college is going to be different. So when you arrive, it might be, you know, your teammate that might be the best ally for you, or it might be a coach. It's, you know, difficult to say, you know, before getting there what it's going to be like. But what we can also do is, what I think is helpful in general, is to talk to people like you who have gone through this. I was a runner myself, but, you know, finding someone who is a male athlete, male runner in our network to talk to you, again, to provide the confidential support. I really think the peer-to-peer is important, especially with that transition from high school to college. What we found is that most people really do have a positive experience, and you know, there's lots of people that care about you and support you and want to help you through that. So I would say, you know, reach out and try and find people who have done the same thing.
Awesome. Any other words to that one?
Yeah, before I was at Arizona, you know, I wasn't out until last year, my junior year of college. I spent 2 years at a different, and you know, I always had my kind of questions about myself when I was in high school, but I was never, you know, brave enough to do anything about it. So props to you for that. But when I did go to college, I think that I struggled a lot with peer-to-peer relations, like what Anna was just talking about. I don't think I really tried to reach out to anybody, and I think that would have made a big difference. You know, kind of finding those people who could help me and spending my time with them instead of spending time with people who were just kind of pushing me farther back in the closet. So there was a huge difference, you know, when I came here, when I transferred to Arizona, and I had JD Snyder. He's well, he was on the men's swim team, and he was an out athlete, so that was really helpful. And I just, you know, felt a huge weight off my shoulders, knowing that there was somebody, you know, that I could kind of knew what it was like to be in my shoes. And yeah, so I think it's just really important to make those connections and, you know, kind of put yourself in a position where you're going to be comfortable being yourself.
Absolutely. We have one more question on Twitter. Let's see. I almost had it. Let me take a look here. Lost it. It was there. Talk amongst yourselves. And you can tweet your questions at Campus Pride using the hashtag StandUpDay. You can find all the folks here on our panel online. And our question is coming in from Trey Allen. Trey asks, how can sports clubs or teams that provide gender opportunities begin trans players? And he also said that we're having a great discussion. This is a good point. Chris, earlier you talked about that sometimes the gender divide pushes genderqueer folks or folks that are in transition away from sports. Maybe you would like to speak on this as well?
Yeah, I cut out when you asked the question. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Absolutely. How can sports clubs and teams that provide gender opportunities begin to welcome trans players? Single gender opportunities begin to welcome trans players.
So I think the reason that we don't have a universal policy on trans inclusion in athletics is because it's obviously very complicated, right? I think there are better practices for policies, but at the basic level, if you're talking about something like intramural or recreation sports, I think it's important to allow folks to compete in accordance with their gender identity. And so that would mean, having female-identified folks on the team and male-identified folks on the team. And in some cases, it depends on how a person identifies. And so a lot of clubs do how a person primarily identifies, and allows that opportunity for folks to play in a place where they feel comfortable. And so it really comes down to providing comfortable and safe playing opportunities for your gender nonconforming and trans players. And a lot of that is working with them individually so that they are comfortable. I realize the complications of that, because in some ways that requires them outing themselves. And so, I'm sort of thinking in the idea that this player would have outed themselves in order to ask, like, where do I play, right? Otherwise, they would just maybe sign up in the way that they identify. Beyond placement on teams, I think it's really important that we think about our facilities that we provide to players. And so, if we have simply a non-gendered changing space to make folks comfortable, what do we have for restrooms? One of the challenges that I had when I was playing recreational dodgeball, actually, was that there were only 2 locker rooms. It was the men's and women's locker room, and this was right when I started to transition, and I didn't feel comfortable going into a gendered space like that. But I couldn't change in a bathroom because the bathrooms were inside the locker rooms. And so, they said that I wasn't allowed to play in the league because I wouldn't use one of these facilities to put my stuff in the lockers. So, when we draw that very hard line and make people choose, we're going to make people uncomfortable. When we have non-gendered spaces, that's good for everyone, right? So, like, accessible restrooms are good for everyone. Everyone likes privacy. So, thinking about what do we have in terms of actual facility spaces, in terms of uniforms, and also in terms of how our teams are aligned. What does the registration process look like? Is there a clear place on your, say, website or in your office or on your paperwork and application to apply to be on the team where folks can go? They know who to talk to if they have a concern about what team they'd be on. Putting that information out there, even just like having a blurb on your website that says, we accept trans players, or if you are trans and want to play, contact such and such a person if you have questions. All of those things that show that you're actually thinking about this is really helpful. So there's not an easy answer for this, but I think that everyone should be able to play sports in a way that feels safe and comfortable. So a lot of times that's case by case.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And we're starting to come to the end of our Hangout here. We've had some really great questions come in online, and we've been able to talk about some really great things here. And earlier we talked about resources and role models, and so this seems like it'd be good for each of us to go through and talk about a resource that you provide from your organization, or a resource that you go back to time and time again that you have found very valuable. There may be some overlap, and that's absolutely okay. And we can start with Monica and move through the list.
And you said just resources that we go back to.
LGBT athletic resources.
Sure. When I was a student athlete there, the AD for student development is someone who I always go back to. And I remember writing about her even in my college statement, or my graduate school statement. She's someone who left an impact on me. So ADs have been particularly powerful in my life in the world of sport. And then I have to give a shout out to Go Athletes. I think as a resource for athletes across the country, for athletes on the campus that I work on now, in the entire network. I think I've built relationships with groups of people, and I think that it is just always the backbone, somewhere that I know that I can call on if I absolutely need it. So those 2 resources, and I think about even Chris's organization has been very helpful to me in educating myself on policies learning to ask the right questions when I'm speaking to athletic administrators about trans inclusion. So just recognizing that there are many, many resources, and all it takes is to find one person to get the conversation started.
Thanks, Monica. Lauren?
Go Athletes, definitely a big one for me too. I mean, Anna, Chris, Sean, everyone at Go has been super nice to me and just really helpful. I know Sean, I think it was Sean, emailed me after I came out, and that was big for me. Also, Outsports was pretty good because they let me write my coming out story, but also I got to write just kind of like whatever I felt like about the power of coming out, and they opened a door for me to just write on any particular topic I want to, and just share those feelings with everyone who reads that. So that's been really nice too. Also, I started this page on Facebook called Students Producing Allied Community Equality, just to kind of bring allies and student athletes together and work on education and just creating inclusive spaces. We have a blog that I have like different people write on whenever they have a topic they feel like they want to express. So I'm kind of working with that right now.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Julie?
That's tough. I have a lot, but probably I would say a mentor role model would be Sherry Murrell at Portland State. So especially women's basketball, we connect on that, and she's just exposed me to, where we actually all met, the panelists at the Nike LGBT Coalition. And but then I'll use any resource that comes at me. So particularly I'll use the NCAA Champions of Respect manual, and I've definitely been getting a lot more into campus pride. So that's why I'm extremely happy to be a part of this as well. And I'm filling out the survey for our athletic department. That's on my to-do list so that we can get everything up to par here. And I know our university has been engaged in it. So there's just so many out there. Even I'll give a shout out to Break the Silence with Nevin, and she's done a lot of great things too. So I just try to educate, and find as many resources as I can.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, you'll have some good ones. So I just want to plug my website. Thanks, Monica, for the shout out. So transathlete.com is a resource for students, athletes, coaches, and administrators to find policies on trans inclusion at various levels of play, K through 12, college, recreation, and national organizations. It's basically just pulled information, so it's not my own content. So on there, there's a resource page also that has the Champions of Respect document, some Women's Sports Foundation information, just a good list of resources for folks surrounding trans inclusion. So we also want to take this time to give a shout out to Pat Griffin and Helen Carroll, Sue Rankin and Jenny Beeman, who have done just tremendous amounts of work in the trans athlete area and just trans inclusion. So those folks have heavily contributed to the content on the website. And organizations like Campus Pride also doing a lot of work at the college level, so that resource is also on there. And then also got to shout out my Go Athletes, the network connection, and having the opportunity to share my experience with others, and also hear other people's experiences. I've learned just a tremendous amount about other identities, and recent conversation about intersection of religion in LGBT athletics. Just there's just so many things that we can talk about and so many different experiences out there. So I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to hear them all. And thank you for letting me be a part of this. This was awesome.
Of course, thank you. Anna?
Hey, so I feel like everyone who just spoke was incredibly modest, because I think you all as watchers should just go down the list and write down Monica, write down their information, follow them. You know, same thing with Julie and Rebby and Lauren and Chris, because as individuals, they are incredible resources for you. They've been through a lot. They've organized events. They've organized campaigns. And I would, you know, recommend reaching out to them. You know, and for Go Athletes, we haven't been able to do anything, you know, big that we've done and get the word out without our partnerships. So Campus Pride, woo, Rebby, you know, Outsports, which was already mentioned. We've done a lot of work with You Can Play. They're fantastic, promoting inclusion through their videos. GLAAD's been great with us. NCLR is fantastic. As Julie mentioned, Break the Silence. There's so many organizations now that if you want to come out and someone isn't supportive, you literally have an army behind you. The LGBT Sports Coalition is together for that fact. So, I mean, again, you should reach out to these people down the line because they're amazing. You can email for Go Athletes. You can email us at info@goathletes.org. And the whole point is that if we don't provide the resource, we'll find someone that does, because that's what we're here for. And now more than ever, we have resources. And there's just some really amazing people in this movement. And I really encourage you to get involved because it'll probably be the best decision of your life. No big deal, though, but it probably will be.
It most likely will be. Thank you so much on behalf of Campus Pride and the Stand Up Foundation to our panelists today, for all of our viewers, for everyone interacting with us online. We want to thank you and empower you to continue these conversations. Challenge your campuses, challenge your communities, and challenge other athletes to stand up, to support each other and advocate for one another. Get people talking about the issues that really matter and find a way to make a change. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Feel free to check out all the resources just listed, and we'll tune in again. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.